Young An felt the pressure first, a slow, crushing weight that pushed against her ribs each time she tried to breathe. Dirt shifted near her ear as she turned her head, and small grains slid across her cheek. For a moment she didn't understand why the ground felt so close. Then her hand jerked against something rough and unyielding, and she realized her wrists were bound tightly with tape. When she tried to bring her knees upward, her legs barely moved. Everything smelled of soil and dead leaves. In the stillness of the night, with nothing but muffled breaths around her, the truth surfaced with terrifying clarity. She was underground. Her husband had buried her alive. Hours earlier, she had sat across from him inside their home in Lacey, Washington, trying to discuss the last stage of their divorce. Tension had been part of their lives for months, but that evening, his anger had a sharper edge. Money, accusations, and resentment piled on top of one another until the conversation turned violent. She felt the blow before she saw it coming, the force of it sending her to the floor. Before she could gather herself, he pinned her down and wrapped tape around her wrists, her ankles, and her head. In seconds, her world went black, behind strips of adhesive that pressed against her eyes. She tried to speak, but he forced more tape across her mouth. Then he dragged her across the floor, her body scraping over hardwood, and shoved her into the back of a van. The air inside felt stale and chemical, and the tape around her wrists cut deeper as she twisted her arms. She had no way of knowing where he planned to take her. She only knew she needed help. She strained her fingers until she felt her Apple Watch beneath the tape. Blindfolded, bound, and terrified, she twisted her wrist in a way that sent a jolt of pain through her arm, but the screen responded. She activated the emergency call. Her voice emerged as a muffled plea. She couldn't see anything. She couldn't say much, but someone on the other end heard her. That brief moment of hope collapsed when the van door slammed open and he noticed the glow under the tape. He ripped the watch off, smashed it, and cursed at the sound of broken glass. That was when she understood he wasn't done. He was escalating. The van jolted over rough terrain as it left paved roads. She felt every bump in her ribs. When the engine finally cut off, cold night air rushed in as he opened the doors. He dragged her out, her feet catching on roots and rocks. She felt the sharp strike of something hard against her chest. Pain lit through her body, hot and disorienting, and she realized he had stabbed her. Even as her legs gave out, he pulled her farther into the woods until she could smell freshly turned earth. He dug fast, grunting as he pulled up soil with his hands. She could hear the scrape of his boots. She could hear her own pulse kicking against her skull. She tried to twist away, but the tape held tight. When the hole was deep enough to hide her body, he shoved her into it, the force knocking the air from her lungs. Dirt rained down over her. Branches scraped her skin as he layered them on top. When he walked away, she could hear his footsteps fading through the brush. Then there was nothing but her heartbeat and the weight of the earth. In the grave, her world narrowed to the space in front of her face. She fought panic by focusing on small movements. She forced herself to breathe slowly through her nose, even as dust filled her mouth and throat. She twisted her wrists again and again, ignoring the sting of skin tearing beneath the tape. Something shifted. A strip loosened. She pulled harder. The tape snapped, leaving her wrists free. She dug outward immediately, pulling dirt away from her face. More soil collapsed onto her arms, but she kept going. She freed her ankles, ripped the tape from her eyes, and saw slivers of moonlight through the branches above. She pushed upward until her fingers broke through the surface. Cold air touched her skin. She clawed her way out of the pit, each movement sending pain through her chest. When she pulled herself free, she lay on the forest floor for a moment, gasping. The trees around her blurred in the darkness, but she knew she needed to move. She didn't know if he was still nearby. She didn't know how much blood she had lost. She only knew she had survived the hardest part. She forced her legs underneath her, using a tree to stand. Every breath hurt. Her hands shook as she pushed through brush and stepped over fallen branches. She followed the faint sliver of moonlight where the trees parted, moving through shadows that felt endless. Her body threatened to collapse with each step, but she pushed forward, holding her side against the pain. The woods seemed vast, and more than once she feared she was walking in circles. But then she saw it, a porch light in the distance. She headed toward it, stumbling more than walking. By the time she reached the house, she could barely lift her arms. She beat on the door with what strength she had left. When it opened, the resident saw a woman covered in dirt, shaking violently, her clothes torn, strips of tape hanging from her wrists. They pulled her inside and called for help. She clung to the wall, terrified that she might collapse before the deputies arrived. When the first officer found her outside near a shed, she ran toward him. Dirt streaked her face and hair. Her voice trembled as she said her husband had tried to kill her. The deputy saw the chest wound, the tape on her ankles, and the bruising along her neck. Other units searched the area, located the van, and found the shallow grave where she had been left to die. The earth was still disturbed, branches scattered nearby, the pit unmistakable. Her husband was arrested within hours. In interviews, investigators pieced together the timeline, the argument, the attack, the tape, the kidnapping, the stabbing, the burial, and her escape. The case moved quickly through the court system. Prosecutors charged him with attempted first-degree murder, kidnapping, and domestic violence assault. During the sentencing hearing, Young stood in the courtroom and described how she had pushed through the weight of the dirt. Her voice broke when she spoke about her children and the moment she feared she would never see them again. The judge called the attack deliberate, violent, and calculated. He imposed a significant prison sentence. What stayed with those who heard the details was not only the brutality of the crime, but the extraordinary strength it had taken for her to survive. She had been buried alive, stabbed, bound, and left for dead. Yet she forced her way up through the soil and found help in the darkness of the Washington woods. Her recovery took time, physically and emotionally, but she faced it with the same determination that had carried her through the night. Her story became a stark reminder of the dangers that can hide behind closed doors and the resilience a person can summon when survival depends on refusing to give up. Even years later, those who followed her case spoke about her courage as something rare and remarkable. Thank you for listening to Horrifying Survival Stories. Subscribe for more stories of those who faced the impossible and lived.